Welcome to another thrilling and fantastic installment of my how to create your own 360 VR rig video. Basically, we're going to use 3 action cams. I bought 3 of the cheapest, good quality or well-reviewed cameras that I could find on the market. This is the ThiEye T5e. It's a 4K action cam. It uses the Umbrella chipset and a Sony IMX sensor. The reason I chose this camera is, well, it has the settings, the manual settings that I require, and the video quality is really good with the Umbrella chipset. It does really well. It does low light really well. It's low grain vision coming out of it. I've tested them just with their standard lens. I have 3 of them. They're brand spanking new. In the process of our thing here today, we are going to void the warranty by replacing the lenses. Whilst this isn't a review of the camera themselves, if someone asks me, is it any good? Well, I'd say it's better than a poke in the eye. Is it the best camera? No. No, it's cheaply made. There are some downsides to these cameras. The first one is they're not the same size as your standard GoPro action cam. It is ever so slightly larger, only by maybe 1 or 2 mil. The eye will no longer fit in your standard frame mounts that are cheaply available out there on eBay land. In fact, it won't fit into the waterproof housings that fit pretty much the whole SJ cam series of action cams, so buyer beware. The other downside is the battery is a different size to the standard SJ cam battery size, which for instance the Get-Ups use. There you go. It's quite a bit larger, which is a real pain in the eye, because essentially I have an investment in quite a few of these batteries, and now I have a larger battery. On the plus side, ThiEye comes with ThiEye, ThiEye, ThisEye, ThiEye, who the hell knows. Comes with 2 batteries per camera, so that's kind of at least a saving grace. Mind you, they don't fit any of the standard chargers, which means you have to stick them in the camera to charge the stupid things. It's disappointing. Let's talk a little bit about the specs of these. They're 4K, they use 170mm field of view lenses, which is no good for us if we want to build a 3-camera 360 VR rig. We will need to upgrade these lenses to 220 field of view or larger. So for those purposes, I bought these guys, which are PanoView Campark 360 VR cameras. Good lenses, shit cameras. So good cameras, insufficiently wide lenses. So what we're aiming to do here is to essentially build a 3-camera VR rig that will roughly be something along these lines. So you have 3 cameras pointing in 3 different directions. Now you might ask, from a 360 VR perspective, why not just use 2 cameras? If you're using lenses such as these, then technically there's enough coverage, field of view coverage, on both sides here to give you a stitch line, which is indeed what the Samsung Gear VR and quite a few of the VR cameras out there do. The problem is, or the reason why you'd want to go to a 3 camera setup instead of using just the 2 is the quality of the wide angle lenses actually degrades quite a lot towards the edges of the lens. These lenses are reasonably sharp in the middle, but the quality degrades the further towards the fringe you go. So by using 3 cameras, you're effectively having a huge amount of overlap, and you're using more of the good part of the wide angle lens than you are the shitty parts of the wide angle lens, which are not so great. And I guess ultimately I chose these ones because price. These were 150 Australian dollars, so that's 3 cameras at $150. So basically the costs mount up. The Campark cameras were about $100 each, and I could have bought the lenses just by themselves for around the same price as the whole Campark camera. All of this is experimental, so you don't know until you try. Let's just go through it. In a previous video I actually disassembled one of these guys and extracted the lens, and I've just got it here. The problem I have is that here is a lens. You might see right on the end of it is a little infrared cut filter that's been glued in. This varies amongst these lenses. That IR cut filter on some cameras, such as the GoPro, is actually on the sensor. So if you look at the end of that lens, this is straight through. So the IR cut filter is actually on the sensor. So I tried this lens on the GoPro and it worked really well, but when I put it into one of ThiEye cameras, these guys actually have their IR cut filter on the back of the lens. Now basically these lenses come into focus about 1 millimeter away from the sensor. In other words, there's only a millimeter gap to play with when you screw these in. So basically the infrared cut filter has to be less than 1 millimeter or somehow fit into that circle. Basically this is a real pain in the ass. I also have these little security cameras, I guess you would call IP cameras. These are Xiaomi. I bought them at a bargain price a long time ago now. Sadly, they turned out to be a bit of a dud, in the sense that these cameras were only ever meant to be used in China and don't work too well here. So these actually have electromechanical infrared cut filter in them as well. That's the light sensor there, but it's very thin. I think 0.35 of a millimeter thick. So as a test case off camera, I managed to glue it down onto this guy. Basically it works. It's able to focus without touching the sensor. It's literally must only have under a millimeter left in terms of distance between the sensor and and the top of the lens and the filter, but it does actually focus in, and the image is good. Look at these cameras. This is a normal one. It's basically got this plastic cover around the lens. It's very easily removed, which we'll see a little bit later. It's too high to fit, for this lens to fit. So the easiest solution was just to remove it. I've already extracted my 2 wide-angle lenses because I got this camera to work. I'm now committing to modifying the other 2, so that's what we're going to do. I guess we'll take you through those steps, and we'll see how it goes. A lot of this will probably be fast forward. So I guess as part of this is we get to disassemble one of these guys, which is actually a bit of a pain to do, to be honest. But yeah, we'll get to see. So we're disassembling this camera to extract the essentially extract the infrared filter from it. I love these cameras. The design of them is really cool. I don't think these were ever meant to be taken apart. That's basically the camera module. Circuit board on the back, circuit board on the front, and basically a plastic cover in between that hides the bit that we need, which is the sensor and the infrared filter. Now obviously I had no idea that this infrared cut filter business would be such an issue. Had I known, had I actually thought about it beforehand, which I didn't, perhaps the idea of buying ready-made lenses rather than buying these Cam Park guys. Of course, you know, I had no idea that the Cam Park cameras wouldn't have an IR cut filter on the lens. Most of these cameras do, although fair point, the GoPro does not. I'd say 0.2 or 0.3 of a millimeter thick. So that's perfect for my purposes. So basically I'm going to go with this. It's pretty easy to remove. The first one I did, touched it with my fingers. Fingerprints are really the bane of your existence where these things are concerned. So if at all possible, do not touch it with your fingers. So what we're going to do is attach this filter to the bottom of that lens there. Do not use super glue. It will ruin both the filter and potentially your lens. So in this case I'm actually going to use some double-sided tape. Now I think ideally you'd want to do this with some glue. You'd want to choose a non-reactive glue, perhaps something in the way of craft glue, perhaps that's not doesn't have any chemicals. Twist up and it should just peel off. It seems to be stuck down with some very thin glue. One infrared cut filter attached to the lens. Right, so here we're going to take apart one of the eyes and get it ready for a changing of the lens. Just gently pry up around the edges with a plastic pry tool. The cowling's not screwed down, so it just clips out. There it is. Let's So there's a bit of glue around the thread of the lens. You want to cut through that with a sharp knife. I like this one, lets me get in. So here I'm just marking it, so I've got I know how far to screw it back in. Cutting the glue. Okay, got the lens coming out. And just so I know which camera, which lens goes to it, I'm just going to mark each. Pack them away for safekeeping. Now there's a little bit of glue to trim off and clean up around here. Take your time, make sure none of it falls into the sensor. There's my lens, make sure it's clean, no fingerprints. Okay, don't forget to put the cowl on first. Screw it in. Make sure you don't go all the way to the bottom. In this case, we've got some glue still in the thread we're going to clean up. Tedious. There we go. Clean it again, just for be sure. Clean it again. Check it out. Screw it in. Ah, yeah. Don't ruin the sensor by screwing it all the way in. So the next step in dealing with these cameras is to actually focus them. To do that, we're using a mini HDMI lead that fits in the camera. We're basically going to throw the image up onto the monitor. There you go. Okay, so here we are. Now I do have focus charts I could use, but I found that the best place to actually focus it is to try to do it on the lettering. So I'm actually looking at the lettering on the monitor, and just by turning the lens one way or the other, you really see when it comes into focus. So this camera, for instance, is, in my opinion, quite good. So cool, it's one. Let's see about the next. Okay, so that is way out of focus. Now this is camera one. The lens is actually really tight here at the focal point, so I'm using quite a bit of force to try to I do seem to have some kind of dust or marks in the lens here, which is a bit crap, but I'm going to live with that. This is always a worry. Okay, so I can just see the lettering coming into focus there. Bit too much. Back a bit. Okay, that looks nice and sharp. Now it's starting to look soft. Nice and sharp. I think that's it. It's a good spot. Worst monitor to try this on, but I found that the other monitors I have lying around were problems in themselves. Okay, so that's two cameras in focus now. Right, so now we're going to put some hot glue just around the thread of the lenses. This is a really fiddly job. Basically I figured it out by collecting some hot glue on a toothpick or a small screwdriver and basically whacking it in between the camera body and the lens. Just kind of letting it solidify against the thread. Find your own way. There's gonna be, probably multiple ways to do this, but my hot glue gun couldn't get in. Once again, better glue perhaps, something non-reactive. Hot glue was all I had, so that's what I went with. It works fine. The advantage of hot glue is it's really easy to take back off if you get it wrong. So it's a non-destructive kind of a way to do it. But yeah, I basically glued up all three cameras just so that the lenses wouldn't move after focusing them. So the next step with these cameras is to I'm basically just going to use this. This is a temporary thing. We're going to build a proper mount. Hopefully, maybe even if I can possibly get the 3D printer calibrated, we'll use that to 3D print a mount. But for now, I can just stick the cameras on here and get some test shots and see what the stitched results look like. So it's going to be a pretty simple affair. Some lens cleaning cloth. I've got some lightweight double-sided tape stuck to this. It just helps it to stick a little bit. Some of it's pulled off already. I'm not too worried. As I said, this is temporary and the rubber band is going to keep it where it needs to be. Just going to check the settings to make sure that all the cameras are the same. Okay, so it's not perfect, but hopefully that's going to be good enough. So what I'm going to do is go out and film some stuff with these and we'll get to see the results.